My daughter left me with 3 children for 10 years after she accused me of kidnapping. The courtroom smelled of old wood and broken dreams. I sat in the defendant's chair, my hands trembling in my lap, watching my daughter, my own flesh and blood, point at me with tears streaming down her face. "She took my children," Rebecca sobbed, her voice cracking with practiced precision. "She kidnapped them. She's trying to replace me as their mother." The judge's eyes shifted to me, cold and assessing. I wanted to scream. I wanted to stand up and tell everyone the truth, that Rebecca had abandoned those 3 babies on my doorstep 10 years ago, with nothing but a note saying she couldn't do this anymore, that I had raised them, loved them, sacrificed everything for them, while she disappeared into a life of freedom and selfishness. But my lawyer had advised silence. "Let me handle this," he'd whispered. So I sat there, 68 years old, arthritis burning in my knees, my heart breaking into pieces as I watched the daughter I'd raised tell lie after lie after lie. "Your Honor," Rebecca continued, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue, "I was young and scared when I had my children. I made mistakes, but I've changed. I've grown. I have a stable home now, a good job, a loving partner. I'm ready to be the mother my children deserve." My stomach turned. The children she was talking about, Emma, now 13, the twins, Jacob and Sophie, now 11, didn't even remember her. Emma had been 3 when Rebecca left. The twins were barely 1 year old. I had been the one up at night with their fevers. I had been the one at every school play, every parent-teacher conference, every birthday party. I had stretched my retirement pension until it screamed, worked part-time jobs at the library and the local grocery store to afford their clothes, their books, their dreams. And now she wanted them back. "Mrs. Morrison," the judge said, looking at me over his reading glasses, "do you have anything to say?" I opened my mouth, but no words came out. What could I say that wouldn't sound like the desperate pleading of an old woman? What could I say that would make them understand? My mind flashed back to that morning 10 years ago. I'd been watering my roses when I heard the crying. At first, I thought it was a cat, that pitiful, desperate sound. But when I walked around to my front porch, I found them. 3 car seats, 3 screaming babies, and a note written in my daughter's handwriting on the back of an overdue electric bill. "Mom, I can't do this. I'm not meant to be a mother. Please take care of them. I'm sorry." That was it. No explanation, no phone number, no forwarding address, just 3 abandoned children and a mother's broken heart. "My client will present her case when appropriate, Your Honor," my lawyer interjected, pulling me back to the present. The judge nodded and shuffled his papers. "We'll reconvene in 3 days for the full hearing. Until then, the children will remain in Mrs. Morrison's care, but supervised visitation with their mother will commence immediately." My heart sank. Rebecca smiled, a small, triumphant curve of her lips that she tried to hide but couldn't quite manage. I knew that smile. I'd seen it before, years ago, when she was 16 and had successfully convinced her father that I was the one who'd crashed his car, not her. When she was 22 and had somehow made her college believe I was sabotaging her education by not supporting her financially enough, when the truth was I'd given her every penny I had. My daughter was a liar, a beautiful, convincing, masterful liar. And now she was going to take my babies away from me. As I stood to leave the courtroom, my legs felt weak beneath me. I gripped the table for support, and Gerald, my lawyer, steadied me with a gentle hand on my elbow. "Don't lose hope," he whispered. "We're just getting started." But as I watched Rebecca walk out of the courtroom, her expensive heels clicking on the marble floor, her designer purse swinging from her shoulder, I felt hope slipping through my fingers like sand. If you're feeling the weight of this story already, please leave a comment sharing your thoughts. And don't forget to like and subscribe. This journey is just beginning, and you won't want to miss what happens next. 3 days later, I stood in my small living room, watching Rebecca walk through the door for the first time in 10 years. She'd changed. Her hair was professionally styled now, honey blonde highlights catching the afternoon light. Her clothes were expensive, a cream-colored blazer over dark jeans, designer bag hanging from her shoulder. She looked successful, put together, nothing like the exhausted, hollow-eyed girl who'd left 3 screaming babies on my porch, with a note scrawled on the back of an electric bill. "Mom," she said, her voice sweet as poison honey. "Thank you for having me." The social worker, a tired-looking woman, named Patricia, stood beside her with a clipboard. "Mrs. Morrison, as you know, this is a supervised visit. I'll be observing the interaction between Rebecca and the children." I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. Emma appeared in the doorway to the kitchen, her dark eyes, so much like mine, wary and confused. "Grandma? Who's that?" My heart cracked. She didn't recognize her own mother. Rebecca's smile faltered for just a second before she recovered. "Emma, oh my God, you've gotten so big." I'm your mom, sweetheart." Emma looked at me, then back at Rebecca. "My mom?" "Yes," Rebecca said, taking a step forward. "I know it's been a long time, but I've missed you so much. I've thought about you every single day." The lie hung in the air like smoke. I wanted to cough it out, clear the room of its toxicity. Jacob and Sophie tumbled into the room, arguing about some video game, and stopped short when they saw the stranger in our home. "Who are you?" Sophie asked, her small face scrunched in suspicion. Rebecca's eyes filled with tears, real or fake, I couldn't tell anymore. "I'm your mother, babies. I'm your mom, and I've come back for you." The next 2 hours were excruciating. Rebecca tried to engage the children in conversation, asking them about school, about their friends, about their favorite things. But her questions felt hollow, scripted, as if she'd researched how to talk to children on the internet. She asked Emma about her favorite subject, but when Emma said biology, Rebecca looked blank, unable to follow up with any meaningful questions. She didn't know that Emma had won the science fair last year. She didn't know that Emma dreamed of being a doctor, specifically a pediatric oncologist, because her best friend's little brother had survived leukemia. She asked Jacob about sports, assuming he played basketball because of his height. But Jacob had never been interested in basketball. He loved robotics, spent hours building complex machines in... Our garage had already won 2 regional competitions. When he tried to explain his latest project, Rebecca's eyes glazed over. Sophie, my little firecracker, was the most direct. "If you're our mum, how come we don't remember you?" Rebecca's face crumpled. "Because I made a mistake, sweetie, a terrible mistake, but I'm here to fix it now." "Grandma's our mom," Sophie said firmly, crossing her arms. "She's always been our mom. She makes us pancakes on Saturdays and helps us with homework and stays up when we're sick." "I know Grandma has been wonderful," Rebecca said, her voice trembling, "and I'll always be grateful to her. But I'm your real mother, and I want to be in your lives again." Patricia scribbled notes on her clipboard, her face unreadable. Emma remained polite but distant. The twins were openly skeptical, whispering to each other when they thought no one was listening. I sat in my old armchair watching this painful performance, my heart breaking with every forced smile, every awkward interaction. Rebecca tried to hug the children before she left. Emma endured it stiffly. Jacob barely tolerated it. Sophie pulled away quickly, wiping her cheek as if removing contamination. When the visit finally ended, Rebecca hugged each of the children, stiff, awkward embraces that they didn't return, and promised she'd see them again soon. At the door, she turned to me, and for just a moment, when Patricia wasn't looking, her mask slipped. "I'm going to win, Mom," she whispered, "and there's nothing you can do about it. They're mine by law. Blood always wins." Then she was gone, leaving the scent of expensive perfume and the echo of a threat hanging in my small, cluttered home. That night, Sophie crawled into bed with me, something she hadn't done in years. "Grandma?" she whispered in the dark. "Is that lady going to take us away from you?" I held her close, breathing in the scent of her strawberry shampoo. "Not if I can help it, sweetheart." "Good," she said, "because I don't want a new mom. I want you." I cried silently in the darkness, long after she'd fallen asleep. That night, after the children were in bed, I sat at my old desktop computer, a clunky thing Emma had helped me set up years ago, and started searching. I typed Rebecca's name into Google with shaking fingers. What I found made my blood run cold. There were photos of her at charity events, smiling beside well-dressed men and women, articles about her work at a prestigious marketing firm, a LinkedIn profile that painted her as a rising star, a woman who'd overcome personal struggles to build a successful career. Her profile picture showed her in professional attire, confident and polished. Her headline read, "Marketing Director, Brand Strategist, Advocate for Working Mothers." The irony made me feel sick. On Facebook, she'd posted photos with captions about finding herself and preparing to be reunited with the loves of her life. People had commented with heart emojis and encouraging words. "You're so brave. Those children are lucky to have you, finally going after what you deserve." I scrolled through months of posts. She'd created an entire narrative. In her version of events, I was the villain, the overbearing mother who'd taken advantage of a young woman's moment of weakness, who'd stolen her children and raised them as my own. There were posts about her healing journey, about therapy sessions that helped her process the trauma of having her children taken from her. She'd even started a blog called A Mother's Return, where she documented her struggle to reunite with her stolen children. The truth didn't matter. The truth never mattered with Rebecca. I kept digging, clicking through pages and pages of search results until I found something that made me pause. An article from 8 years ago in a small local newspaper from a town 3 hours away. The headline read, "Local Woman Charged with Fraud." I clicked on it, my heart pounding. The photo was blurry, but I recognized my daughter's face. The article detailed how she'd scammed several elderly individuals out of their savings, posing as a financial advisor. She'd promised them high returns on investments that didn't exist. One victim, an 82-year-old widow, had lost her entire life savings, over $50,000. Charges had been filed, but the case had been dismissed due to lack of evidence and witness credibility issues. I sat back in my chair, my mind racing. Rebecca had always been good at talking her way out of trouble, always good at making herself look like the victim, always good at making other people question their own perceptions. But this was different. This was a pattern. I printed the article and tucked it into a folder. Then I kept searching. Over the next few days, I became obsessed. Every free moment I had, I was at that computer, digging through Rebecca's digital footprint, looking for anything that might help me prove what kind of person she really was. I found more articles about failed business ventures where partners claimed she'd embezzled money. I found complaints from former employers about missing funds and forged documents. I found social media posts she'd deleted, but that still existed in cached versions, posts where she bragged about manipulating people, about playing the game better than anyone else. One deleted tweet from 3 years ago read, "Why work hard when you can work smart? People are so easy to manipulate if you know which buttons to push." Winning. But I also found something else, something that made my hands shake as I read it. A blog post from 6 months ago, written under a pseudonym, but with enough identifying details that I knew it was her. She'd used the name Phoenix Rising, but she'd mentioned specific details about her life, her job, her location, details that only she would know. In it, she talked about her plan to reclaim her children. She wrote about how she'd spent years building the perfect life, the perfect image, so that when the time came, no one would question her fitness as a mother. "The old woman thinks she's won," the post read. "She thinks because she's raised them for 10 years, they're hers. But blood is thicker than water, and the law recognizes blood. I've created the perfect image, successful career, stable relationship, community involvement. I've documented my healing journey publicly. I've positioned myself as the victim of parental alienation. When I walk into that courtroom, I won't just be a mother seeking custody. I'll be a sympathetic figure who overcame adversity. and she'll be the bitter old woman who stole someone else's children. I've already won. She just doesn't know it yet." The post continued. "The kids won't want to come with me at first. They've been poisoned against me. But that doesn't matter. Once I have legal custody, they'll have no choice, and eventually they'll forget about her. Children are adaptable. They'll learn to love me, or at least they'll learn to obey me. Either way works." I printed that too, my hands shaking so badly I could barely click the mouse, and I started to form a plan of my own. My lawyer, Gerald Henderson, was a kind man in his 70s who'd helped me with my husband's estate years ago. He wasn't expensive, which was good because I didn't have money for expensive, but he was thorough, and he believed me. "This is good, Margaret," he said, flipping through the folder I'd brought him. "This is very good, but we need more. We need to prove a pattern of behavior, not just isolated incidents. A good lawyer could argue that these are past mistakes, that people change, that she deserves a second chance." "What do you suggest?" I asked, my voice hoarse from crying. He leaned back in his chair, thinking. His office was small and cluttered with legal books, the furniture worn but comfortable. "We need witnesses, people who knew Rebecca when she was younger, teachers, friends, neighbors, anyone who can testify to her character, not just her actions, but her character. We need to show that this pattern of deception and manipulation isn't just a phase, it's who she is." I nodded slowly. "I can do that." He pulled out a legal pad. "Start with her childhood, anyone who witnessed her behavior growing up, then move forward chronologically. Teachers, coaches, employers, friends, anyone who saw the real Rebecca." "What about the children?" I asked. "Can they testify?" Gerald's face softened. "They can, but I don't recommend it. It's traumatic for children to testify against a parent. And Rebecca's lawyer would paint it as parental alienation, you turning them against her. It's better if we have objective third parties." Over the next week I reached out to everyone I could think of. Old neighbors, Rebecca's high school teachers, the parents of her childhood friends. Some people didn't want to get involved. Some had moved away and couldn't be reached. But enough people responded that I started to see the full picture of who my daughter really was. What I heard broke my heart all over again. Mrs. Chen, who'd lived next door to us for 15 years, remembered Rebecca stealing money from her purse during a neighborhood barbecue when Rebecca was 17. "I never said anything because I didn't want to cause trouble," she admitted over tea in my kitchen, "but I knew it was her. I saw her go into the house, and when I checked my purse later, $200 was missing. She denied it, of course, cried and said she was insulted that I'd accuse her. She was so convincing that I almost believed I'd miscounted. But I knew. Mr. Patterson, Rebecca's 10th grade English teacher, recalled her plagiarizing an entire essay and then crying to the principal that he was targeting her unfairly when he'd given her a failing grade. "She turned on the waterworks in the principal's office," he said over the phone, his voice still bitter after all these years. "Claimed I had it out for her because she was pretty and popular, said I was punishing her for rejecting my inappropriate advances." My blood ran cold. "She accused you of that?" "Yes. It was investigated, of course. Security footage and witness statements proved I'd never been alone with her, never said anything inappropriate. But the accusation almost destroyed my career anyway. The principal suggested I take early retirement to avoid further controversy. I refused, but my reputation never fully recovered. Sarah Williams, who'd been Rebecca's best friend in middle school, told me about the time Rebecca had spread rumors that Sarah's mother was having an affair. Completely untrue, just because Sarah had gotten a lead role in the school play that Rebecca had wanted. "She destroyed my mum's reputation," Sarah said, her voice still carrying the pain of that memory. "People whispered about it for years. My parents almost divorced because my dad started to believe it. And when I confronted Rebecca, she just laughed and said I should have known better than to compete with her. We were 12 years old, Margaret. 12. And she was already that calculating. Each story was another piece of evidence, another brick in the wall I was building. There was the soccer coach who'd benched her for missing practice, only to have Rebecca claim he'd touched her inappropriately. The investigation cleared him, but he'd quit coaching anyway. There was her college roommate who'd found her prescription medication missing, anxiety medication that Rebecca had no prescription for but was selling to other students. There was the elderly man she'd befriended at a nursing home during a volunteer project, who'd later discovered she'd forged his signature on checks, totaling $3,000. The pattern was undeniable. For her entire life, Rebecca had been lying, stealing, manipulating, and escaping consequences by playing the victim so convincingly that people questioned their own perceptions. But I knew it still might not be enough. Rebecca was smart. She'd cleaned up her act in recent years, at least on the surface. She'd created a persona that was difficult to crack. I needed something bigger, something undeniable, something current that would prove she hadn't changed at all. And then I found it. I'd noticed in one of Rebecca's social media posts that she mentioned her loving partner, someone named David Chen. She'd tagged him in several photos, always at nice restaurants or charity events, always looking happy and successful. I found David's LinkedIn profile and discovered he worked at the same marketing firm as Rebecca. Senior account manager, MBA from a prestigious university. He looked kind in his profile picture, warm eyes, genuine smile. I also found his email address listed on a professional networking site. I spent 3 days crafting the perfect message, not accusatory, not desperate, just concerned. Dear Mr. Chen, I wrote, my name is Margaret Morrison. I believe you're in a relationship with my daughter Rebecca. I'm reaching out because I'm worried about her recent behavior regarding her children, whom I've been raising for the past 10 years. I would like to speak with you, if possible, to better understand her current situation and intentions. This is a difficult situation for all involved, and I'm hoping we can have a candid conversation. Please call me at your convenience. I included my phone number and hit send before I could second-guess myself. 2 days later, my phone rang. Mrs. Morrison? The voice was male, uncertain, with a slight accent. This is David Chen. I got your email. Thank you for calling, I said, my heart racing. I appreciate it very much. There was a long pause. Then, what's going on with Rebecca and the kids? She told me a very different story than what your email suggests. I'm sure she did, I said, quietly. Mr. Chen, I need to ask you something. How much do you really know about my daughter? Another pause. I know she's had a difficult past. She's told me about her struggles, about how her mother, you, took her children when she was young and vulnerable. She said you wouldn't let her see them, that you'd poisoned them against her. Is that what she told you? Yes. I took a deep breath. Mr. Chen, David, I'm going to tell you the truth, and then I'm going to send you some documents. And then you can decide for yourself what kind of person my daughter really is. For the next hour, I told him everything. About the day Rebecca left her children on my doorstep. About the years of silence. About the lies she was telling in court. About the evidence I'd gathered, the fraud charges, the witness statements, the blog post where she outlined her manipulation strategy. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, there was a long silence. Send me the documents, he finally said. Please. I did that very night. I scanned everything into PDFs and emailed them all to him. 3 days later, he called again. I've read everything, he said, his voice hollow. I've also done some digging of my own. Mrs. Morrison, I think you need to know something. My chest tightened. What? Rebecca has been lying to me too, about a lot of things. She told me she was an only child. She told me her parents were dead. She told me she'd had children young, but had given them up for adoption because she couldn't care for them, and that she'd recently learned you'd somehow gotten custody and were refusing to let her see them. I closed my eyes. Of course she had. But that's not all, David continued. I found evidence that she's been stealing from our company. I work with our accounting department on some projects, and I started noticing irregularities. She's been creating fake vendor accounts and routing payments to herself. It's sophisticated. She's good with numbers, But once I knew what to look for, I found it. Over the past 8 months, she's stolen approximately $70,000. The number hit me like a physical blow. I'm going to report it to our CEO tomorrow, David continued. I'm also going to testify on your behalf if you need me to. Mrs. Morrison, I thought I loved her. I was planning to propose next month. I'd bought a ring, but I was in love with a person who doesn't exist. Everything she told me was a lie. His voice cracked, slightly on the last word. I'm sorry, I said softly. I'm so sorry she did this to you too. Don't apologize for her, he said firmly. She's an adult. She made her choices. And those children, God, those children are lucky they have you. Because if they'd gone to her, he trailed off, but I understood what he couldn't say. When we hung up, I sat in silence for a long time. The pieces were coming together, slowly, painfully, but they were coming together. I had 1 more week until the trial. 1 more week to build the strongest case possible. 1 more week to save my children. We're at the turning point of this story. The grandmother is building her case piece by piece. But will it be enough to stop Rebecca? Drop a comment with your predictions. Hit that like button and make sure you're subscribed. The next chapters are going to change everything. The second court hearing arrived like a storm on the horizon, inevitable and terrifying. I walked into the courtroom with Gerald, my folder of evidence clutched against my chest like armor. I'd barely slept the night before. Emma had made me breakfast, scrambled eggs and toast, and the twins had hugged me extra tight before I left. You got this, Grandma, Jacob had whispered. The children were not present, thank God, but the gallery was full. David Chen sat in the 3rd row, his face grim and determined. Several of the witnesses I'd contacted were there too, ready to testify if needed. Rebecca sat at the plaintiff's table, with her own lawyer, a sharp-looking woman in a power suit who exuded confidence. Rebecca herself looked perfect, vulnerable and hopeful, dressed in soft colors that made her look younger, more maternal, a pale pink blouse, cream cardigan, minimal makeup that somehow made her look both beautiful and fragile. She didn't look at me when I entered. The judge entered, and we all rose. Let's begin, Judge Hendricks said, settling into his seat. Ms. Morrison, your counsel may present your case. Rebecca's lawyer stood first. Your Honor, my client is a reformed woman who made a mistake in her youth, leaving her children in her mother's care during a severe postpartum depression and mental health crisis. She has since recovered, sought extensive therapy, built a stable life and career, and is now ready to resume her role as their mother. We're asking for full custody, with the grandmother receiving visitation rights. Mental health crisis? I whispered to Gerald. She never had. And postpartum depression. She left because she wanted to party and travel and live without responsibility. Gerald patted my hand. Let me handle this, Rebecca's lawyer continued, painting a picture of a young woman overwhelmed by the demands of motherhood, suffering alone, making the heartbreaking decision to leave her children with her mother temporarily, only to have that temporary arrangement become permanent when I allegedly refused to return them. My client has tried repeatedly, over the years, to reconnect with her children, the lawyer said, but Mrs. Morrison has blocked all attempts. She's alienated the children from their mother. She's created a situation where these children don't even recognize their own parent. It was masterful, completely false but masterful. When it was our turn, Gerald stood slowly. He was old, but his voice was steady and strong. Your Honor, what we have here is not a story of redemption. It's a story of manipulation. Rebecca Morrison has a documented history of lying, theft, fraud, and abandonment. She didn't leave her children due to mental health issues. She left them because they were inconvenient. She left them with a note on the back of an electric bill, disappeared for 10 years without a single phone call or letter or birthday card, and is now attempting to reclaim them not out of love, but out of a desire for control and revenge against her mother. Rebecca's eyes flashed with anger, but she quickly schooled her features. Back to sadness, Gerald continued. We have evidence that Ms. Morrison has engaged in fraud. both in her personal and professional life. We have witnessed testimony from individuals spanning her entire life, from childhood to present day, establishing a clear pattern of deception and manipulation, and we have documentation, written by her own hand, detailing her plan to manipulate this court system to gain custody for reasons that have nothing to do with maternal love. He began presenting the evidence piece by piece, the newspaper articles about the fraud charges, the witness statements from teachers, neighbors, former employers, the blog post where she'd outlined her strategy. Rebecca's lawyer objected repeatedly, calling the evidence circumstantial, irrelevant to her current fitness as a mother, and character assassination. But Judge Hendricks listened carefully, his expression growing more serious with each new revelation. Then Gerald called David Chen to the stand. David walked up slowly, avoiding Rebecca's gaze. When he was sworn in, he looked directly at the judge. "Mr. Chen," Gerald said, "can you describe your relationship with Rebecca Morrison?" "We've been together for about a year," David said, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. "Or at least I thought we were together. I've recently discovered that much of what she told me was lies. Can you elaborate?" David took a deep breath. "She told me her mother had stolen her children through legal manipulation. She told me she was a victim. She told me she'd spent the last 10 years working on herself, going to therapy, preparing to be a good mother. She told me her parents were dead. She told me she was an only child. All of it was false." He explained about finding evidence of Rebecca's theft from their company, about the fake vendor accounts, about the money she'd been siphoning off for months, $70,000 in total. "I've reported this to our CEO," he said. "Rebecca was fired 5 days ago. There's also a criminal investigation pending. The FBI is involved because some of the wire transfers cross state lines." The courtroom erupted in whispers. Rebecca's lawyer jumped to her feet, objecting loudly, but the damage was done. I watched my daughter's face crumble, not with genuine emotion, I knew her too well, but with the realization that her carefully constructed facade was collapsing. Judge Hendricks called for order, banging his gavel. "I'll hear final arguments after a 30-minute recess." During the recess, I saw Rebecca in the hallway, arguing with her lawyer in hushed, furious tones. When she spotted me, she broke away and marched over. "This is your fault," she hissed, her beautiful face twisted with rage. The mask had finally slipped completely. "You've turned everyone against me. You've poisoned them all." "I told the truth," I said quietly. "That's all I did, Rebecca." "The truth?" She laughed bitterly. "You don't know what truth is. You've always been jealous of me, always trying to control me. And when I finally escaped, you kept my children just to punish me. You couldn't stand that I had a life outside of your control. I kept your children because you abandoned them," I said, my voice stronger now. "You left them on my doorstep like garbage, and I loved them. I raised them. I gave them everything I had, every penny, every ounce of energy, every moment of my retirement." "They're mine," Rebecca spat. "They belong to me. I gave birth to them. Children aren't property, Rebecca, they're people, and those 3 people in there don't even know who you are, because you chose not to be part of their lives. For 10 years, you chose yourself over them every single day." For a moment, I saw something raw in her eyes. Pain, maybe, or regret, but it was gone as quickly as it appeared, replaced by cold calculation. "I'll win this," she said. "I have to. Do you know what happens if I lose? The fraud charges stick. I go to prison. I lose everything. But if I win custody, if I can present myself as a devoted mother fighting for her children, the jury will be sympathetic. The charges might disappear. Don't you see? I need this." The honesty shocked me. She wasn't even pretending anymore. "You're using those children as a legal strategy," I said, my voice shaking with rage. "They're human beings, Rebecca. They're your own children. They're a means to an end," she said flatly. "That's all anyone is, really. You taught me that, Mom. You were always so focused on what people could do for you, how they could make you look good. I just learned the lesson better than you intended." "I never taught you that," I said, tears streaming down my face. "I don't know who taught you that, but it wasn't me." She studied me for a moment, her expression unreadable. Then she said very quietly, "Maybe you're right. Maybe I was just born broken." Then she walked away, her heels clicking on the marble floor. When we reconvened, Gerald presented his closing argument. He spoke about the children, about Emma's anxiety, about the twins' confusion, about the stability and love I'd provided for a decade. "These children have a mother," he said, his voice ringing through the courtroom. "They've always had a mother, and her name is Margaret Morrison. Rebecca Morrison is a stranger to them, a stranger who has proven time and time again that she is motivated not by love, but by ego, manipulation, and now, as we've learned, by a desperate attempt to avoid criminal consequences for her actions. She doesn't want to be their mother. She wants to use them." Rebecca's lawyer tried to counter, arguing that people can change, that past mistakes don't define current fitness, that Rebecca deserved a chance to prove herself, but her arguments felt weak, desperate, hollow against the mountain of evidence we'd presented. Judge Hendricks listened to everything. Then he leaned back in his chair, silent for a long moment. The courtroom was so quiet I could hear my own heartbeat. "I've reviewed all the evidence," he finally said. "I've listened to the testimony, and I've considered what's in the best interests of these children, which is the paramount concern of this court." My heart hammered so hard I thought it might break through my ribs. "Ms. Rebecca Morrison," the judge continued, his voice stern, "you have presented yourself as a reformed individual seeking to reconnect with your children, but the evidence shows a pattern of deception, manipulation, and illegal behavior that continues to this very day. You abandoned your children 10 years ago, and in that time you made no attempt to contact them, support them, or ensure their well-being. Your recent interest in them appears to be motivated not by maternal love, but by a desire to manipulate the legal system to avoid consequences for your criminal behavior." Rebecca's face had gone pale, her hands gripping the table in front of her. Furthermore, the children themselves, according to the social worker's report, have expressed no desire to leave their grandmother's care and significant anxiety about the prospect. They are thriving in her home. She has provided them with love, stability, security, and every advantage she could afford on a limited income. She has been their mother in every way that matters. Judge Hendricks looked directly at me. "Mrs. Morrison, I'm granting you full legal custody of your grandchildren, with all parental rights transferred to you. I'm further ordering that Rebecca Morrison have no contact with the children until they reach the age of 18, at which point they may choose for themselves whether to have a relationship with her. This is not a typical order, but these are not typical circumstances. The evidence suggests that continued contact, even supervised, would be harmful to the children's emotional well-being." The courtroom exploded with sound, but I heard none of it. I had won. I had actually won. My hands were shaking so badly that Gerald had to help me stand. Rebecca stood up, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. "This isn't over," she shouted at me, her voice cracking. "I'll appeal. I'll fight this. You can't keep them from me forever." "Ms. Morrison," Judge Hendricks said sharply, "you are dangerously close to being held in contempt. I suggest you leave this courtroom now, before I add that to your growing list of legal troubles." Rebecca's lawyer grabbed her arm and practically dragged her out, but not before Rebecca turned back one last time. "I hate you," she screamed at me. "I've always hated you." The words should have hurt, but all I felt was relief. It was finally over. The weeks following the trial were strange. I kept waiting for the other shoe to drop, for Rebecca to appear at my door with some new scheme, some new lie, but she didn't come. I later learned through David, who checked in on me occasionally, that Rebecca had been arrested for the fraud at her company. She was facing serious charges: wire fraud, embezzlement, identity theft. David had provided all the evidence to the FBI, and the case against her was solid. "She's looking at 5 to 10 years. David told me over coffee one afternoon. Her lawyer is trying to negotiate a plea deal, but the prosecutors aren't interested. She hurt too many people. He looked tired, older than when I'd first met him. I should have seen it, he said. The signs were there, but she was so good at playing the victim. Don't blame yourself, I said gently. She's had a lifetime of practice. The children, meanwhile, slowly returned to normal. Emma, who had been anxious and withdrawn during the trial, started smiling again. Her grades improved. She rejoined the debate team she'd quit because she was too stressed. The twins stopped asking questions about that lady who said she was our mom. They went back to their normal routines, Jacob with his robotics projects, Sophie with her reading and writing. One evening, as I was making dinner, Emma came into the kitchen and wrapped her arms around my waist from behind. "Grandma?" she said softly. "Yes, sweetheart? I'm glad you're our mom. I mean, I know you're technically our grandma, but you're our mom. You're the only mom we've ever known." I had to set down the knife I was holding because my hands were shaking too much to hold it safely. I turned and hugged her back, tears streaming down my face. "I love you," I whispered. "I love all three of you more than anything in this world. You're my greatest joy." "We love you too," she said. "And Grandma, thank you for fighting for us, for not giving up." That night, after the children were asleep, I sat in my small living room and allowed myself to really feel everything I'd been holding back. The fear, the anger, the exhaustion, the overwhelming relief. I had spent 10 years raising children I never planned to raise. I had stretched every dollar, every ounce of energy, every moment of my retirement to give them a life, to give them stability, love, opportunity, and I would do it all again in a heartbeat. I thought about my daughter, sitting in a jail cell, facing the consequences of her choices. Part of me felt sad for her, for the person she could have been if she'd chosen a different path, but mostly I felt grateful. Grateful that I'd been there when those babies needed someone. Grateful that I'd had the strength to fight for them. Grateful that the truth had prevailed. I pulled out my phone and texted Gerald, "Thank you for everything." He replied almost immediately, "You did the hard part. I just helped you tell the truth. Those kids are lucky to have you." I smiled through my tears and went to bed, sleeping peacefully for the first time in months. 6 months after the trial, I received a letter. It was from Rebecca, postmarked from a correctional facility 2 states away. My first instinct was to throw it away without reading it. But curiosity got the better of me. I opened it carefully, my hands steady now in a way they hadn't been during the trial. The letter was short, written in Rebecca's neat handwriting on prison stationery. "Mom," it began, "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. I know I've hurt you in ways that can never be repaired. I'm writing this not because I expect anything from you, but because my therapist here says I need to acknowledge the harm I've caused. So here it is. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for abandoning Emma, Jacob, and Sophie. I'm sorry for trying to take them from you. I'm sorry for all the years of lies and manipulation. The truth is, I was sick, Mom. I still am. But I'm getting help now. Real help. Therapy 3 times a week. Medication for personality disorders I didn't know I had. I don't expect you to believe me. I don't expect you to write back. But I wanted you to know that I see what I did. I see it clearly now, without all the rationalizations and excuses, and I hate myself for it. Those kids are better off with you. They always were. You were the mother I should have been. Thank you for being there when I wasn't. Rebecca." I read the letter 3 times, searching for manipulation, for hidden agendas. But all I found was what seemed like genuine remorse. I folded it carefully and put it in a drawer. I didn't write back. Maybe someday I would. Maybe someday, if Rebecca truly changed, if she truly got the help she needed, we could have some kind of relationship again. But not now. Now, I needed to focus on the 3 beautiful souls sleeping upstairs, on their futures, on their dreams. Emma wanted to be a doctor. Jacob wanted to be an engineer. Sophie wanted to be a teacher. and I was going to do everything in my power to help them achieve those dreams. I started setting aside every extra penny in a college fund. I worked extra hours at the library. I applied for every scholarship and grant I could find, and I watched them grow. Emma became the editor of the school newspaper. Jacob's robotics team won the state championship. Sophie started a tutoring program for younger kids who were struggling to read. They were remarkable, brilliant, kind, everything their mother wasn't, and they were mine. Emma graduated high school with honors. I sat in the audience, Jacob on one side of me and Sophie on the other, and I cried like a baby when they called her name. She'd been accepted to 3 different colleges, all with partial scholarships. We'd been saving every penny we could, and with the scholarships, some student loans, and a grant she'd won for academic excellence, we'd make it work. She wanted to study biology, pre-med track. She was going to be a doctor. After the ceremony, she found me in the crowd and hugged me tight. "We did it, Grandma," she whispered. "We actually did it." "You did it, sweetheart," I said, my voice choked with emotion. "I'm so proud of you. Your grandfather would be so proud." She pulled back, tears in her eyes. "I couldn't have done it without you. You know that, right? You gave me everything." The twins were thriving too. Jacob had been accepted into a prestigious summer engineering program at a local university. Sophie had won a writing contest and was having her essay published in a national magazine. They had grown into remarkable young people, and they had done it not because of their biological mother, but in spite of her. That evening, we had a small celebration at home, just the 4 of us. Pizza and ice cream cake, nothing fancy, but it was perfect. As I watched them laugh and tease each other, I felt a profound sense of peace. This was my family. This was where I belonged. I thought about all the people who had helped us along the way. Gerald, who had fought so hard for us and had since become a dear friend. David, who had done the right thing even when it was difficult and painful. The teachers and neighbors who had testified, who had stood up for the truth even when it was uncomfortable. I thought about Rebecca, still in prison, still working through her issues. David had told me she was doing well in her therapy programs, that she seemed genuinely changed. Part of me hoped it was true, not for my sake, but for hers. And I thought about myself, an old woman who had somehow found the strength to raise 3 children when she should have been enjoying her retirement. I didn't regret a single moment. "Grandma?" Sophie said, pulling me from my thoughts. "Are you okay? You look sad." "I'm not sad, baby," I said, smiling at her. "I'm happy, happier than I've been in a long time." "Good," she said, grinning, "because you can't be sad on Emma's graduation day. It's against the rules." Jacob threw a piece of popcorn at her. "There are no rules about that, dummy." "Don't call your sister a dummy," I said automatically, but I was laughing. Emma joined in, and soon we were all laughing, the kind of deep, genuine laughter that comes from love and security and home. This was my life. Messy, chaotic, exhausting, beautiful, and I wouldn't trade it for anything. Epilogue, the letter that changed everything. 5 years after the trial, Emma was in her 2nd year of pre-med at a prestigious university. Jacob and Sophie were juniors in high school, already talking about colleges and careers and futures bright with possibility. I was 73 years old, moving a little slower than I used to, my arthritis a constant companion. But I was alive. I was here. I was watching my grandchildren, my children, grow into adults who would change the world. One afternoon, I received another letter. This time, it was from a parole board, notifying me that Rebecca was being released early for good behavior and completion of therapeutic programs. She'd served 3 years of her 5-year sentence. The letter informed me that she had requested permission to send me and the children letters, but that permission would only be granted with my consent. She wasn't asking to see us, just to write to us. I sat with that letter for a long time. Emma, now 20, found me sitting at the kitchen table, staring at it. "What's wrong, Grandma?" she asked. I showed her the letter. She read it slowly, her face serious. Then she looked at me. "What are you going to do?" "I don't know," I admitted. "What do you think?" Emma was quiet for a moment, thinking it through with the same careful consideration she applied to everything. I think people can change. I don't know if she has, but if she wants to write to us, not to see us, just to write, maybe we should give her that chance. We don't have to write back if we don't want to, but maybe we should let her try." I looked at my granddaughter, so wise, so compassionate, so much stronger than her mother had ever been, and I felt my heart swell with pride. "Okay," I said, "we'll allow the letters, but only letters, and only if you and your brother and sister want them." Emma nodded. "I'll talk to Jacob and Sophie." A week later, the first letter arrived. It was addressed to all 3 children, and it was different from the letters Rebecca had sent me years ago. This one was longer, more thoughtful, more honest. She wrote about her time in prison, about the therapy she'd undergone, about the diagnosis she'd received, narcissistic personality disorder and borderline personality disorder, and the medication and intensive treatment that had helped her see herself clearly for the first time. She didn't make excuses. She didn't blame anyone else. She simply acknowledged her failures and expressed her hope that someday they might be able to forgive her. "I don't expect to be your mother," she wrote. "Margaret is your mother. She earned that title. She deserves it. She gave you everything I should have given you, but if you'll let me, I'd like to be someone in your life, even if it's just someone you write to occasionally, even if it's just a distant connection. I want to know you. Not to take you away from the woman who raised you, but to be part of your story, if you'll have me. I understand if you say no. I've given you every reason to hate me and no reason to trust me, but I'm asking anyway because that's what my therapist says I should do. Ask for what I want, instead of manipulating people to get it." The children read the letter together. Then they talked about it for hours, debating whether to respond, what to say if they did. In the end, they decided to write back. Not because they forgave her, not because they wanted a relationship with her, but because, as Emma said, we're better than her mistakes. We can choose to be kind, even when it's hard, and maybe, by showing her kindness, we can help her continue to change. I watched them write their responses, careful, guarded, but honest, and I realized something profound. I had won more than a custody battle 10 years ago. I had won the chance to raise 3 human beings who understood empathy, forgiveness, compassion and strength, who understood that being kind didn't mean being weak, who understood that you could set boundaries and still show grace, who understood that people are more than their worst moments, even when those worst moments are terrible. They were going to change the world, these 3, and I was going to be there to watch them do it. As I tucked the children's letters into envelopes to mail, I thought about everything we'd been through, the fear, the pain, the struggle, the triumph, and I realized that every moment had been worth it, every